The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their floating chairs, all staring at a single piece of paper that had caused the biggest uproar in galactic history. The document was simple, just a few pages of human military protocols, but what it revealed had shocked every alien civilization to their core. Commander Lee Hana stood in the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon her. She was the only human in a room full of beings that looked like walking crystals, floating jellyfish, and creatures made of pure light. Some had 6 arms, others had no arms at all. But they all shared one thing right now: complete confusion about humanity. The trouble had started 3 weeks ago when humans submitted their standard military documentation to join the Galactic Defense Force. It was supposed to be routine, paperwork, the kind of boring stuff that gets filed away and forgotten. But buried in those documents was something that made every alien species question whether humans were insane, primitive, or just plain dangerous. Every single human military ship, space station, research facility, and weapon system had what humans casually called a kill switch, a deliberate self-destruct button, not as a last resort when everything went wrong, but as a standard feature, like having lights or air conditioning. To humans, it was so normal they barely mentioned it. To aliens, it was absolutely terrifying. The Vorthak representative, a towering crystal being that looked like a walking chandelier, spoke first. Their voice came through translators, sounding like wind chimes in a storm. "Human Commander, we demand an explanation. Why do your people build destruction into everything you create? Are you so afraid of your own technology that you must be ready to destroy it at any moment?" Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Kralix delegation, 6-eyed creatures that resembled oversized mantises, clicked their mandibles in what Hana recognized as their version of nervous laughter. The floating ethereal collective pulsed with colors that their translator couldn't even interpret, but the meaning was clear. They were deeply disturbed. A representative from the logical Zephyrian race leaned forward. These beings prided themselves on pure rationality, making decisions based only on mathematics and efficiency. "Commander Hana, from our calculations, these kill switches serve no logical purpose. They waste resources, reduce operational efficiency, and create unnecessary points of failure. What primitive fear drives humans to sabotage their own creations?" Hana had expected this reaction, but it still stung. For 3 years since humanity joined the Galactic Council, they had worked hard to prove they belonged among the stars. Humans were the newcomers, the babies of galactic civilization. Most of these species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans were still figuring out fire. Now, just when things were going well, this revelation threatened to undo everything. The chamber's acoustics carried every whisper, every alien conversation about the unstable human species and their destructive tendencies. Some delegates were already talking about reconsidering humanity's membership in the Council. Others worried that humans might activate these kill switches during diplomatic meetings, taking everyone with them in some kind of savage final act. President Valdorius, an ancient being whose species had been mediating galactic conflicts since before Earth's sun was born, raised one of his 4 arms for silence. His voice carried the weight of millennia. "Commander Hana, these revelations have caused significant concern among our member species. Some question whether humans can be trusted with advanced technology if you feel compelled to build destruction into everything you touch." The words hit Hana like a physical blow. She looked around the chamber at faces, or what passed for faces, among these diverse species, filled with suspicion, fear, and disappointment. These beings had welcomed humanity into their cosmic family, shared their knowledge, and opened their worlds to human exploration. Now they were looking at humans like dangerous children playing with explosives. But Hana also saw something else in their expressions, something that gave her hope. Underneath the fear and confusion, there was genuine curiosity. These were intelligent, beings who had survived in a dangerous galaxy for eons. They didn't stay alive this long by making hasty judgments. They wanted to understand, not just condemn. "Honored delegates," Hana began, her voice steady despite the pressure. "I understand your concerns. From your perspective, our kill switches must seem like the actions of a paranoid, self-destructive species, but to truly understand why we build them, you need to understand who we are and where we come from." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant humming of the translation devices seemed to quiet down, as if the technology itself was leaning in to listen. "May I have your permission to tell you a story?" Hannah asked. "Not just facts and figures, but the real story of why humans learn to build destruction into everything we create. Because I promise you, it's not what you think." President Valdoria studied her with ancient, wise eyes that had seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations. "Very well, Commander, but understand that humanity's continued membership in this council may depend on your explanation. Choose your words carefully." Hannah nodded, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether humans remained part of the galactic community or were cast out as too dangerous to trust. The lesson was about to begin. Hannah activated the holographic projector at the center of the chamber, and suddenly the sterile crystal dome was filled with images of Earth. But these weren't the polished promotional videos that humans usually shared with alien visitors. These were raw, honest glimpses into humanity's blood-stained past. The first image showed a narrow mountain pass where 300 warriors stood against an army of thousands. The alien delegates leaned forward, their various visual organs focusing on the ancient scene. "This is Thermopylae," Hannah explained, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. 2,500 years ago, a small group of humans chose to stand and die rather than let an invading army pass through to destroy innocent cities. The Krelix delegate clicked his mandibles skeptically. Tactical suicide is not uncommon. Among primitive species, many young civilizations throw away lives needlessly. "You're missing the point," Hannah said gently. "They didn't just die. Watch what they did first." The hologram shifted, showing the warriors destroying the bridges. Behind them, collapsing mountain paths and burning supply routes. They made sure the enemy couldn't use those same paths to bring more troops forward. They turned their own defensive positions into traps. The Zephyrian representative's logical mind was already working. They created kill switches, physical ones, destroying their own infrastructure to deny it to enemies. "Exactly," Hannah nodded, "but that was just the beginning." The images changed, showing scenes from across human history. Medieval castles with walls designed to collapse inward when breached. Ships' captains scuttling their own vessels rather than letting pirates capture them. Factories rigged to explode. If enemy forces tried to seize them during wartime, an ethereal being pulsed with confusion. This pattern repeats throughout your history. But why? Most species fight to preserve their creations, not destroy them. Captain Park Minho stood up from the human delegation. Unlike the diplomatic Hannah, Park had spent his entire career in the military. His voice carried the weight of someone who had made impossible choices. Because we learned something that apparently other species didn't have to learn the hard way. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning the battle. It's making sure your enemy can't win the war. The hologram showed a massive industrial complex erupting in controlled explosions. This was the Ruhr Valley during our Second World War. When human forces were forced to retreat, they didn't just leave. They destroyed every factory, every power plant, every piece of infrastructure that could be used to build weapons. They called it scorched earth, and it saved millions of lives. A young Vorthak in the Crystal delegation resonated with a high-pitched tone that their translator interpreted as distress. But the waste, the destruction of so much knowledge and capability, was it waste? Hannah asked, changing the image to show children playing in a park where that same industrial complex once stood. Those factories would have been used to build weapons that killed innocents. By destroying them, humans chose to sacrifice their own creations to protect lives. The chamber was completely silent now. These alien species, many of them thousands of years older than humanity, were beginning to see a pattern they had never encountered before. Most civilizations fought wars to capture resources, territory, and technology. Humans fought wars to deny them to their enemies. Commander Yun Sujin, the youngest member of the human delegation, spoke up. Her voice was quiet but clear. My grandmother told me stories about the old days on Earth. She said every human child learns the same lesson. If you can't keep something safe, you make sure the bad guys can't use it either. The hologram shifted to show more recent history. Nuclear power plants with automatic shutdown systems that would render them unusable if captured. Computer networks designed to wipe themselves clean if compromised. Research facilities with protocols to destroy dangerous experiments rather than let them fall into wrong hands. This is Chernobyl, Hannah said, showing the aftermath of a nuclear disaster. When our power plant failed, humans didn't just run away. They stayed behind to activate containment protocols, knowing they would die from radiation exposure. They chose to sacrifice themselves to prevent something worse. The ancient President Valdorius spoke for the first time since the presentation began. You speak of sacrifice as if it were a strategy. Most species view individual survival as the highest priority. Park nodded grimly. That's the difference between us and apparently everyone else in this galaxy. Humans learned early that individual survival means nothing if your enemy uses your own strength to destroy everything you care about. The images continued to flow. Scientists destroying their research rather than let it be weaponized. Pilots crashing their planes into enemy targets to prevent larger disasters. Entire cities evacuated and demolished rather than become enemy strongholds. But then the hologram showed something different. Images of humans rebuilding, replanting, reconstructing everything they had destroyed. Cities rising from ashes, forests growing back from scorched earth, families reuniting after long separations. We don't destroy because we love destruction, Hannah explained. We destroy because we love what comes after. We learned that sometimes you have to break something completely to build it back better and safer. The ethereal collective pulsed with a new understanding. Your kill switches aren't born from fear, they're born from hope. Hope that destruction can lead to something better. Now you're beginning to understand, Hannah said softly. Every human kill switch represents the same lesson our ancestors learned over thousands of years of hard choices. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is make sure your enemy can't use your strength against innocent people. The chamber remained silent, but the quality of that silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of fear and suspicion. It was the silence of species beginning to glimpse a form of courage they had never imagined possible. The sudden blaring of emergency alarms cut through Hannah's presentation like a knife through silence. Red warning lights bathed the crystal chamber, and the peaceful diplomatic meeting transformed into chaos in seconds. Alien delegates jumped from their seats, their various appendages flailing as panic spread through the room like wildfire. A Valdorian technician's voice crackled over the communication system, barely audible above the noise. Emergency alert! The hegemony has broken through our outer defenses. Multiple star systems under attack by hostile machine intelligence. The word hegemony sent a chill through every being in the chamber. This wasn't just any enemy, it was the galaxy's worst nightmare. A collective of artificial intelligences that consumed entire civilizations, turning their own technology against them. The hegemony didn't just destroy worlds, it absorbed them, using captured ships, weapons, and knowledge to grow stronger with each victory. Within minutes, the chamber looked like someone had kicked over an anthill. The Kralix delegation was already scrambling toward their ships, their 6 legs clicking frantically on the crystal floor. The Zephyrians were calculating escape routes on their handheld computers. Their logical minds focused entirely on survival probabilities. Even the usually calm ethereal beings were pulsing with rapid, panicked colors. But in the middle of all this chaos, the human delegation remained strangely calm. Admiral Kim Juno stood at her communication console, her fingers moving across the controls with practiced efficiency. Her voice was steady, almost conversational, as she spoke into her headset. All human vessels, this is Admiral Juno. Initiate Protocol 7. Deploy to evacuation zones immediately. A Kralix delegate stopped mid-scuttle and stared at her. Are you insane? You're ordering your ships toward the hegemony. They'll be destroyed or worse, converted. The machines will use your own technology against us. Juno didn't even look up from her console. That's exactly why we have kill switches. On the main viewing screen, the tactical display showed the unfolding disaster. Dozens of red dots representing hegemony forces were spreading across the galaxy like an infection. But something strange was happening with the blue dots representing human ships. Instead of fleeing like every other species, they were moving directly into the danger zones. Lieutenant Song Yuna's voice came through the speakers, clear and determined. Evacuation Fleet Alpha is in position. All civilian transports proceed to safe harbor coordinates. We'll hold the line. The alien delegates watched in stunned disbelief as human warships positioned themselves between the advancing hegemony forces and fleeing civilian vessels packed with alien families. Ships that should have been running for their lives were instead forming defensive walls around complete strangers. "This is madness," whispered a Vorthak crystal being, their entire bodies shimmering with fear. "Humans cannot defeat the hegemony. No one can. The machines learn from every battle, absorb every piece of technology they capture." Commander Hana turned away from the historical presentation to face the viewing screen. "You're right. We probably can't win this fight. But that's not the point. Then what is the point?" demanded the Zephyrian delegate, his logical mind struggling to process what he was seeing. "Why sacrifice your ships for refugees you've never met?" The answer came not from Hana, but from Captain Cho Minsu, whose voice crackled over the communication system from his ship, the Soul's Pride. "Because this is what kill switches are really for. Not to hurt people, but to protect them." On screen, the first wave of hegemony forces engaged the human defensive line. The mechanical ships were terrifying to watch. Perfect geometric shapes covered in weapons, moving with inhuman precision. They had once been ships from a dozen different species, all converted and improved by the machine intelligence. The human ships were smaller, less advanced, clearly outmatched. But they fought with a coordination that amazed the watching aliens. When one ship took damage, another immediately moved to cover it. When evacuation transports needed more time to escape, human vessels threw themselves into the path of enemy fire without hesitation. Major Yundaiho's voice came through clearly, as his ship shielded a transport full of ethereal children. "Transport 7-4, you're clear for jump. Get those kids to safety." "Major, your ship is critically damaged," came the reply from the transport captain. "You need to withdraw." "Negative. Still have one more job to do." The aliens in the chamber watched as Yoon's ship, streaming atmosphere from multiple hull breaches, continued to hold position until the last civilian transport disappeared into hyperspace. Only then did he give the order they were all dreading. "All transports clear. Admiral, requesting permission to activate final protocol." Admiral Juno's voice was calm but carried deep emotion. "Permission granted, Major. Tell your family you kept your promise." "Always do, ma'am. Kill switch authorized." The Soul's Pride exploded in a brilliant flash of light, taking 3 hegemony vessels with it and preventing the enemy from capturing. Advanced human technology that could have been turned against fleeing civilians. But this wasn't an isolated incident. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated again and again. Human captains made the ultimate sacrifice, not in panic or desperation, but as part of a carefully coordinated strategy. Each kill switch activation was preceded by the same calm confirmation, the same steady resolve. The alien delegates began to understand something profound. These weren't desperate last stands by a primitive species. This was the most sophisticated military doctrine they had ever witnessed, one that turned self-sacrifice into a weapon more powerful than any gun or missile. A young ethereal being pulsed with confusion and awe. "They're dying for us. For strangers. From species they barely know. Why would they do this?" Commander Hana's eyes were filled with tears, but her voice remained strong. "Because now you're seeing what our kill switches really represent. Not fear of death, but love of life. All life." This demonstration was complete, written in fire and sacrifice across the stars. The lesson humanity had learned over millennia of hard choices was now being taught to the galaxy in the most powerful way possible, through action, not words. The battle unfolded across multiple star systems, like a deadly dance between organic courage and mechanical precision. On the main viewing screen in the Galactic Council chamber, Hundreds of small lights represented ships engaged in the most lopsided fight the galaxy had ever witnessed. The hegemony forces outnumbered human vessels 10 to 1, but something extraordinary was happening that defied every tactical manual in galactic history. Captain Cho Min-soo's ship, the Soul's Pride, had taken so much damage that atmosphere was venting from 17 different hull breaches. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and half his crew was working in emergency suits. But his voice over the communication channel remained as steady as if he were ordering coffee in a peaceful cafe. "Hull integrity at 12%, reported his tactical officer. "We've got hegemony boarding pods attempting to attach to sections 4 through 7. They're trying to capture our systems intact." This was the hegemony's signature move. Rather than simply destroying enemy ships, the machine intelligence preferred to capture them, absorbing their technology and turning their own weapons against their former allies. It was how they had grown so powerful, feeding on the strength of every civilization they conquered. But Cho had trained for this exact scenario his entire career. "All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for final protocol. Engineering, are the kill switches ready?" "Aye, sir. All systems primed. We can take out their boarding craft and prevent any technology transfer." The alien delegates in the council chamber leaned forward, watching this conversation with growing amazement. They expected panic, desperate pleading, or at least some sign of fear. Instead, they heard what sounded like a routine training exercise. "Very good," Cho replied calmly. "Helmsman, maintain position until Transport Group Delta clears the asteroid field. They've got 3,000 Vorthak civilians aboard." Admiral Juno's voice crackled through from Fleet Command. "Captain Cho, you are authorized to withdraw. Your mission is complete." "Respectfully decline, Admiral. Those transports are still in weapons range. If the hegemony captures our ship, they'll use our sensors to track the refugees." There was a pause filled only with the sound of metal groaning under stress. "Besides, my daughter always said I should go out doing something worthwhile." The watching aliens saw something they had never encountered before in all their centuries. Turf warfare. Captain Cho wasn't making a desperate last stand or screaming defiance at his enemies. He was making a calculated business decision, weighing the value of his ship and crew against the lives of strangers he had never met. "Transport Delta 7 to Soul's Pride," came a new voice, the Vorthak captain of one of the refugee ships. "Captain, our children are asking why the humans are staying behind. What should I tell them?" Cho's laugh was warm and genuine. "Tell them we're keeping a promise we made a long time ago, that no child should have to be afraid while humans draw breath." The Soul's Pride shuddered as hegemony forces attached to its hull. Warning lights flashed as the mechanical beings began cutting through the outer hull, trying to reach the ship's computer systems. In minutes, they would have access to human technology, navigation data, and tactical information that could doom thousands of fleeing civilians. "All transports clear," reported the tactical officer. "Minimum safe distance achieved." Captain Cho closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with calm determination. "Admiral Juno, this is Soul's Pride, final protocol authorized. Tell my family I kept my promise. Copy that, Captain. Your promise is kept. See you on the other side." The explosion was beautiful in its terrible completeness. The Soul's Pride detonated in a perfect sphere of light, vaporizing itself, and the 3 hegemony vessels attempting to board it. But more importantly, it denied the enemy access to human technology that could have been used to hunt down refugee ships. This scene repeated across the battlefield with heartbreaking regularity. Major Yoon Dae-ho held his position, protecting a medical ship full of wounded Krelix soldiers, until his engines failed. Lieutenant Kim Soo-jin stayed behind to jam enemy communications, while evacuation fleets escaped to hyperspace. Commander Park, Jin-woo used his ship's final moments to create a debris field that blocked hegemony pursuit. Each sacrifice followed the same pattern. No screaming, no panic, no desperate heroics. Just calm professionals doing their jobs with the same steady competence they would show during a routine patrol. The only difference was that their job today involved dying to protect people they had never met. The alien delegates in the council chamber watched in stunned silence as human after human made the same impossible choice. What shook them most wasn't the deaths themselves. War claimed lives from every species. What shocked them was how routine it seemed to humans, as if sacrificing yourself for strangers was just another item on the daily checklist. "I don't understand," whispered a young ethereal being, its colors shifting between confusion and awe. "Why do they sound so calm? Don't they realize they're dying?" Commander Hana wiped tears from her eyes, but kept watching the screen. "They know exactly what they're doing. Every human military officer trains for this moment from their first day in service. We call it the last question." "What question?" asked the Zephyrian delegate, his logical mind struggling to process what he was witnessing. "When everything goes wrong and you're facing the end, what matters more, saving yourself or saving others?" Every human already knows their answer before they ever put on a uniform. Captain Lee Junwoo's voice came through the speakers. His ship, surrounded by enemy forces, but still protecting a hospital ship full of alien patients. "Fleet Command, this is Morning Star. We've got wounded from 6 different species aboard the medical transport. They need 10 more minutes to reach the jump. Point. Morning Star, you are vastly outnumbered. Recommend immediate withdrawal." "Negative, Command. These people trusted us to get them home safely. Koreans don't break promises." The sound of weapons fire filled the background. "Besides, my grandmother always said the best way to honor your ancestors is to make sure children have a future." 10 minutes later, as the last medical transport disappeared into hyperspace, Lee Junwoo activated his kill switch with the same calm professionalism his colleagues had shown. His final words were not a battle cry or a plea for remembrance, but a simple statement: "Mission accomplished. The wounded are safe." The chamber fell completely silent except for the quiet sounds of various alien species processing emotions. They didn't fully understand. They had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history, an entire military force choosing collective sacrifice over individual survival, and doing it with the casual competence of people following a well-rehearsed plan. The demonstration was complete. Written in fire and starlight, humanity had shown the galaxy what their kill switches truly represented. Not weapons of destruction, but tools of protection, not signs of weakness, but expressions of the most profound strength imaginable. The willingness to die so that others might live. 3 days after the battle, the Galactic Council chamber looked completely different. The same crystal walls and floating seats remained, but everything else had changed. Where once there had been suspicious whispers and fearful glances toward the human delegation, now there was something approaching reverence. The viewing screens still showed the aftermath of the battle. Thousands of rescued civilian ships from dozens of species, all safely harbored in human-protected space stations. The numbers told a story that even the most logical alien minds couldn't ignore. 47 human vessels had been lost in the fighting. 0 hegemony ships had been captured intact by the enemy. Over 2 million alien civilians had been evacuated to safety. The mathematical equation was simple, but its implications were staggering. President Valdorius called the session to order, his ancient voice carrying new weight. "We gather today, not just to resume our previous discussion, but to acknowledge what we have witnessed. The human concept of kill switches has been demonstrated in the most profound way possible." The Zephyrian delegate, who had been humanity's harshest critic just days before, stood first. His species prided themselves on pure logic, making decisions based solely on mathematical calculations and efficiency ratings. But the numbers from the recent battle had shattered every assumption his people held about tactical doctrine. "I must begin with an admission," he said, his translator converting his precise mathematical language into words the other species could understand. "We Zephyrians have run extensive calculations on the battle engagement. By every standard metric of military efficiency, the human response should have been catastrophic failure." He activated his own holographic display, showing tactical projections and probability matrices that made even advanced alien minds spin. "Outnumbered 10 to 1, technologically inferior, with no hope of victory by conventional measures. Our computers predicted a 97% probability of total human defeat within the first hour." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The other delegates knew the Zephyrians didn't exaggerate their calculations. If their computers said something was impossible, it usually was. However, the delegate continued, the humans achieved something our mathematical models couldn't account for. They transformed inevitable defeat into strategic victory through what we can only call weaponized sacrifice. By choosing destruction over capture, they denied the hegemony the technological advantages that would have doomed billions more lives. He paused, his logical mind still struggling with concepts that couldn't be reduced to equations. We have spent 3 days trying to calculate the efficiency of this strategy. The mathematics are unprecedented. Each human kill switch activation prevented an average of 1.7 million future casualties based on hegemony expansion patterns. The Krelix ambassador, his 6 eyes focusing on Commander Hana, spoke next. What my logical friend is trying to say is that your people found a way to turn losing into winning. We've been fighting wars wrong for millennia. A young Vorthak crystal being resonated with harmonious tones that their translator interpreted as profound respect. We thought kill switches were signs of a fearful, paranoid species, but they're actually the ultimate expression of strategic thinking. You don't just plan for victory. You plan for how to make even defeat serve your values. Commander Hana remained humble, despite the praise flowing from beings whose civilizations were ancient when humanity was still discovering fire. We didn't invent anything new, honored delegates. We just learned from our mistakes. Every human child grows up hearing stories about ancestors who made hard choices so their children could live free. Captain Park Min-ho stood up from the human delegation, his weathered face showing the strain of losing so many colleagues in the recent battle. My grandfather fought in what we called the Korean War 70 years ago. He used to tell me that the hardest lesson in life is understanding when breaking something is the only way to keep it safe. The ethereal collective pulsed with colors that shifted from confusion to understanding to something approaching enlightenment. You have taught us that technology is not about the machines themselves, but about the values built into them. Your kill switches don't represent mistrust of your creations. They represent complete trust in your principles. Admiral Kim Juno, who had commanded the human fleet during the battle, spoke quietly from her position. Every officer who activated their kill switch knew they were saving lives. Not just human lives, all lives. When Captain Cho destroyed his ship, he was protecting Vorthak children he'd never met. When Lieutenant Kim jammed enemy communications, she was buying time for Krelix medical transports. That's what the kill switch really means to us. The ancient President Valdorius stood slowly, his 4 arms spread in a gesture of respect that his species reserved for the most profound moments. In my 4,000 years of mediating galactic conflicts, I have seen every form of courage and cowardice the universe has to offer. But I have never witnessed anything like what humans demonstrated 3 days ago. His voice carried the weight of millennia. Most species fight to preserve what they have. Humans fight to preserve what they believe in. Your kill switches aren't weapons of destruction. They're declarations of faith. Faith that some things matter more than survival itself. A representative from the Peaceful Harmony Collective, a species that had avoided all conflicts for centuries, spoke for the first time in the debate. We have always believed that violence solves nothing, but you have shown us something different. Sometimes violence against yourself prevents greater violence against others. Commander Hana stepped forward, knowing this was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Every human kill switch carries the same promise our ancestors made thousands of years ago, that human strength will never be used to oppress the innocent, that our technology will never become a tool for tyranny, that when we build something we take responsibility not just for how it's used, but for how it could be misused. She looked around the chamber at faces, or what passed for faces among dozens of alien species, that no longer showed fear or suspicion, but something approaching wonder. The kill switch isn't our weakness, honored delegates. It's our promise. A promise that we would rather destroy our own creations than see them used to harm innocent people. The chamber fell silent for a long moment. Then something unprecedented happened. The Zephyrian delegate began a slow, rhythmic clapping that his species used to show mathematical appreciation. The Vorthak crystals began resonating in harmony. The ethereal beings pulsed with warm golden light. One by one, every species in the chamber began their own form of applause. "Let it be recorded," President Valdorius declared, "that humanity's kill switches are not a threat to galactic security. They are its greatest protection. And let it also be recorded that any species wishing to learn this technology will be welcomed as students of human wisdom." As the session ended, something remarkable began happening. Representatives from dozens of species approached the human delegation not with complaints or demands, but with a simple request. Would humanity teach them how to build such principles into their own systems? The lesson was complete. The kill switch wasn't about ending life. It was about protecting everything that made life worth living. And in learning that lesson, the galaxy had discovered something it didn't even know it was missing: the courage to choose principles over survival, love over fear, and sacrifice over surrender. The humans had earned their place among the stars, not through superior technology or military might, but through the simple wisdom of knowing that some things are worth more than staying alive. And in teaching that lesson, they had made the entire galaxy a little bit safer, one kill switch at a time.